Hey, how's it going everybody? In this video, I want to go through another coding challenge. Specifically, we're going to look at the two-sum question, which is Leetcode number 1, and it is in the category easy. And one funny thing about this question is that on Leetcode, this is the most frequently solved question on the platform. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. The question is as follows. Given an array of integers, return indices of two numbers such that they add up to a specific target. And then we have two assumptions. The first one is that each input has exactly one solution, and using the same element twice is not allowed. So let's briefly have a look at the example input and the output. So let's make an array with a couple of numbers. And let's also define a target value. I'm going to label it t, and this target value is just going to be 9. So now we need to return the indices of the two numbers that add up to this target value of 9. Now at a first glance, you can already see that 2 and 7, which is the number with index 0 and the number with index 1, add up to 9. So ideally, our output is going to be equal to an array which has the numbers 0 and 1. So how can we write an algorithm which does this for us? Or perhaps before we do that, let's just briefly remind ourselves of the assumptions and how they relate to this input. So the first one says each input has exactly one solution. And of course, for this input, this is the case because no other two numbers except for the first two add up to 9. And in addition to that, we're not using the same number twice because we're adding 2 and 7, which are two different numbers, right? Okay, so let's go on and create an algorithm. So how can we create an algorithm that actually solves this coding question? So the way that we can approach this, the first approach that I would take is the sort of brute force approach, where you take the first number and then you add the next number and see if it is the target value. Now let's take a target value. Let's make our target value be the value 17. No, let's make it 18. Sorry, let's make it 18. So you can already see that it's going to be the sum of these two numbers, 7 and 11. But let's try and think of this algorithmically. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this first number 2 and we're going to add 7 to it, which of course is 9. And that's not the number we want because we want 18. So what we've done is we've added 2 to 7, but that didn't work. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take 2 and we're going to add it to 11. So 2 plus 11 equals 13, which is also not the number we want. So we're going to move to the next number, which is 2 plus 15, and that is equal to 17, not the number we want. But then what's going to happen is after we've added 2 to each of the remaining numbers, we're going to move on to the next number in our sequence, which is over here, number 7. And we're going to add 7 to the next number, which is 11. And there we go, we get 18. So this is exactly what we were looking for. And we know that 7 has the index 1 and 11 has the index 2. So this is the output that we would be looking for. So let's go ahead and see how we can implement this way of working through the numbers in code. So we're going to have two for loops. The first for loop is going to go through the numbers once, and the second for loop will do the same. So let's go ahead and write that down. We're going to define an algorithm which takes as an input the numbers, and we also take a target value. The target value, remember, is what we're doing over here. So it's the numbers, it's the sum that the two numbers from the array should have. All right, then in addition to that, we're going to define an output array, which is basically going to store whatever we're going to print out as an answer. And at the moment, we're going to make it an empty array. Then we're going to create the first for loop. So for I in range length of the numbers array. And then within that loop, we're going to create another loop for j in range length of nums. And then we're going to check if the sum then we're going to check if the sum of the numbers, if the sum of the numbers is going to be equal to our target value. And we're going to say that the target over here is target. And of course, we need to be having two equal signs over here. And if the two numbers that we have in the current iteration of the for loop do add up to the target value, then we want to append the index of the two numbers into the output. So we're going to say output.append, and we're going to put in these two indices. And of course, if the length of the output array is not equal to 0, then we can go ahead and break. Now, why can we do this? Why do we break this when the length of the output array is not 0 anymore? Because at the beginning, over here, you can see that there are no numbers in the output array. So it is 0. But as soon as we find a combination of two indices whose numbers are the target value, we can in fact stop the calculation because we already have our answer. We know for a fact that each input only has one solution, so we don't need to look for another once we have our very first. And that is why we can break. So that is exactly what we can do. And of course, since I'm not using Leetcode, and since I'm too stingy to pay the money to get a Leetcode account, we do need to go ahead and do this the old-fashioned way by actually outputting the value using the print statement. And now let's pass into the algorithm the inputs. Let's just go ahead and take the example that we had earlier. So we're going to take the same number sequence, and the number 9 is our target value. And then subsequently, if I go ahead and run this, you can see that it does in fact give us the right combination of indices. So it says 0 and 1, and of course the number with the index 0 is 2, the number with the index 1 is 7, and the sum of these two numbers is 9. But now one thing that I wanted to prevent has actually happened, because we've gotten the same combination twice. And remember earlier how I said I would like to break the sequence whenever I have the right result? I did do that, but I made the indentation go a bit too far. So let's take that indent back and let's run it again. And you'll see that it stops after the very first correct answer has been found. And earlier on the right hand side, you can see over here, we took the value of 18 as our target value. So let's go ahead and change this to 18 and see if we get the desired result of 1 and 2 that we talked about earlier. So if I go ahead and run this again, you can see that that is precisely the result that I get.